This thing has been sitting on my workbench for a week, taunting me and waiting for me to start tearing into it. This is a 7-inch Rhodes metal shaper. The serial number records on these only go back to 1929. Based on the serial number on this one, it's probably about 1920. This would have originally been a flat belt drive, either off of a line shaft or some of them had a stand with a motor on it. This one's been converted to a V-pulley with a really neat modification in that this is a planetary gearbox on it. It's a 5-to-1. There's no motor on this right now and no means of mounting a motor. I'm really interested to get into this and see how it works, where it came from, but somebody knew what they were doing when they put this on. I'm excited about this because it means I don't need to put a counter shaft on it. I should be able to run straight off the motor. The linkage for the power feed is bent. I'll have to make a new one of those. There are a couple small cracks in the eccentric. I'll need to evaluate that a little bit more when I get into it. The pin that holds this collar on the elevating screw is sheared off, so right now I can raise the table, but I can't lower it, and the door is missing here. So it's a project machine. Overall, it's not too bad. A lot of this is actually just kind of grease and grime, and it comes right off. But I'm going to break it all down, do some evaporust, do some good cleaning, see what we got. Usual routine for these things. Woodruff keys like this can be a real pain to get out sometimes, but if you can grab it right in the edge of the mill vise. Well, that came out without a fight right as my memory card filled up, but you get the idea. There's a little spring in here that's laid over. Maybe it's supposed to be, maybe it's not, I don't know. And then it looks like this is two separate pieces with something. It's actually not lined up with that set screw. I'm guessing that this, oh, yep, look at that. So this is going to be, so this dial you can turn. I feel like I just did this. Taper pins are like USB cables. It's always the third way that you try them. That's just an oil hole. This evaporust is getting pretty old. It still kind of works, but it's pretty slow. It always almost feels like cheating. This dial was the one part that I was really worried about coming out well, because it was pretty corroded and hard to read, but I think a little polishing and that's going to look really great. The way the vertical nut is on here, and with the dovetail on the other side here, you can't slide this off up or down. You have to take this plate off and swing it out. This is tetrazsodium EDTA, which is a chelating compound. I'm basically making homebrewed evaporust here. This ended up being about a 2.5% concentration, which from what I read is on the weak side, but it seemed to work okay. And then some dish soap to cut down any grease that's still on it, and buffer it back with citric acid to a pH of between 8 and 9. Wear gloves when you're doing this. Not wearing gloves was a really bad idea. This worked for light surface rust, but overall I still like real evaporust better. I know some of you might judge me for doing a rattle can job on this, but I'm okay with that. So this is what happens when a project sits on my workbench for too long. It tends to accumulate other projects on top of it. There are a bunch of parts on this, like this piece, that I don't think are original. I think this was done later. But all of the modifications that are done pretty well. These bolts are even marked as to which hole they go in, but there are no other hex head bolts anywhere on this. And there's a keyway in the bull gear that's not being used, which is why I don't think that's original. I didn't oil the surfaces that weren't painted when it came out of the rust tank, so they got a little bit of flash rust on it, but it pretty much comes right off. Looking at this gearbox, there are no marks on it, but it looks like from the presence of other pins and holes in it that it's been repurposed from something. Something is binding up in the gearbox. It's totally locked up, so I need to pull it apart and probably just keep adjusting the depth of it until I get it right. So what was happening with this is there's nothing that really retains this shaft, controls the end play in it. So as I was tapping things on, it actually tapped the bearing on the inside out. I eventually went back, put everything together loose, tightened this up, got it to where it was happy, and then went back in and tightened the set screws on things. Got one screw that's gone missing, and I really have no idea how much or what kind of oil to put in here, so I'm going with some 75 W90 gear oil. They're gears, putting gear oil in it. I think it's going to start leaking out here before it comes out anywhere else. I think that wraps up everything I can do on this before I start remaking some parts. So I'm going to leave this video off here. As always, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video where I make the rest of the parts I need for this thing.